How old do you think the use of oil is? Really? Well, the answer is thousands of years old, even as an energy source. Sometime in 600 BC, people in China found oil wells under salt reservoirs and built bamboo pipes to take the oil to their homes for heating. However, oil and other fossil fuels weren't really used in mass in the United States and the United Kingdom, at least, until the Industrial Revolution. Suddenly, people could travel and send items faster than ever before. The world changed, and so did the temperature. In 1938, Guy Callendar recorded the first evidence that the world's temperature had started to rise. And surprise, it hasn't stopped rising. Hello everyone, I'm Kainda Nzinga, a senior here at Cary Academy, and I'm here today to talk to you about how totally crazy climate change is, how especially crazy it is for people of color, and finally how to take a step back and start to include communities of color in a more sustainable and green energy-driven future. We actually realized that running our main way of lighting, heating, and transportation on dead dinosaur bones had some major downsides pretty quickly. In 1968, Dr. John Mercer predicted that the global ice caps would start to melt, leading to a disastrous rise in sea levels. Fast forward to the present day, and we've started making solutions. But despite our steps forward in technology and our heads up from past scientists, global warming is quickly overwhelming our planet. The country of Tuvalu is considering uploading a digital copy of itself onto the internet, because by 2100, 95% of its land will be completely underwater. Erosion on the island is already so bad that a fifth of residents have relocated. We are living in a time period where a nation can completely disappear, not just because of internal conflict or conquests, but because of the consequences of an energy source. We are living in a world where getting to work and driving to school can release harmful chemicals that harm the world around us. But we know this. We also know that oil will become obsolete, eventually, but it's a matter of how quickly. And we need quick solutions, considering that the International Energy Organization predicts that the world's temperature can rise 2.4 degrees Celsius, or 36 degrees Fahrenheit, this century. It isn't just the heat that's killing us, though. In the US, 4 out of every 10 people live in an area with air pollution. An even crazier air pollution fact is that people of color are 2.3 times more likely to live in an area with low air quality. So far, I've framed this switch from oil and fossil fuels into clean energy as one that we need to do for our collective health. Even though this switch could save a nation from disappearing or another species from going extinct, in every switch throughout history, something has had to give. And historically, the givers have been people of color. And this isn't because people of color don't care that they are being left out of the conversation about climate change. A poll done by Gallup in 2024 found that Black Americans were 53% likely to be very or fairly concerned about climate change, while only 35% of white adults were. A similar percentage of Black Americans were concerned about exposure to oil pollution and water contamination. And Black Americans are also twice as likely to white Americans to completely relocate because of environmental fears like harmful pollutants. And we see the effects of these statistics in other areas. Black men are more likely to get lung cancer than other racial groups, and yet African Americans have lower cumulative exposure to things like smoking than other racial groups. These statistics aren't by coincidence. Just like the environment and climate change, everything interacts. So despite the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's claims that minority communities near oil plants aren't worth considering, let's bring them to the table today. Because honestly, despite segregation legally ending, communities are more divided by race now than ever. An article in Times Magazine found that 80% of large metropolitan areas were more segregated in 2019 than they were in the 1980s. Detroit is one of the most racially segregated cities, and it is also home to Michigan's most polluted area code, 48217. This same area code was home to an incinerator, built in the 1980s to give jobs to white construction men, and it burned trash from predominantly white neighborhoods until 2019. Even today, it was found that facilities that produce lead as a byproduct tend to move into black neighborhoods in Detroit. But today, there are also some notable pushes to include previously underrepresented groups in the benefits of clean energy. Canada, for example, is starting to include Indigenous people in their solutions to climate change. The norm there used to be a small consultation with tribes before completely moving forward, whether the energy plans be green or not. But it has since shifted to include them as equity partners. This means that Indigenous people are being involved from the beginning, directly communicating with project management, working alongside technicians to install wind turbines. These tribes actually understand what's going on their land, and they financially benefit from it. And this hasn't slowed down clean energy projects at all. It reinvigorated them. This year, in Canada, around 200 medium to large clean energy projects are going forward with Indigenous involvement. And although this was in part due to changes in government policy, it was largely because of Indigenous people themselves pushing to be included in green energy companies' plans. As Joan Carling, the executive director of Indigenous People Rights International, stated, "The green energy transition without respect to Indigenous rights is just another form of colonialism." And I couldn't agree more. So how do we make sure that the future looks every shade of green? Well, the answer is, surprise, complicated. But it starts with being curious and informed. Next time you go to buy a phone, ask yourself where the lithium battery comes from. Next time a piece of legislation passes that claims it's only trying to help the environment, try to read the fine print. Go past the big reporters on things like climate change to more local papers, organizations like Uproot, which works to sponsor environmental journalists of color. It started in 2019 and has over 500 journalists working for them, from companies like Vox, Grist, the Los Angeles Times, and CNN. This platform allows environmental journalists of color to talk about how climate change has affected their towns, cities, and neighborhoods. The amount of connections that this organization was able to make in just a few years is amazing. We don't have to continue to only listen to a few sources on things like the climate. We can add in different perspectives and broaden our horizons, even when it comes to something as seemingly straightforward as environmental science. Next, remember that clean energy is coming in, fast. If you feel like the world is a melting popsicle that's one lick away from disappearing, you're not alone. Around 2/3 of Americans have experienced some anxiety about climate change. But this collective anxiety also means that there are more people now than ever willing to work to make a difference. In Bangladesh, communities used to take forever to recover electricity after natural disasters like floods. In response, the company SoulShare created the first ever advanced solar microgrid. With this system, you can buy and sell solar energy, keeping money within the economy and allowing people to have light at night without kerosene lamps. You don't need panels with this system to use solar energy, just a solar bank to buy it. Even though this system was made in Bangladesh, it's available here in the United States too. And since it's so decentralized, it can bounce back from natural disasters quicker than the traditional way you would get your electricity. In fact, Duke Energy's installed an advanced microgrid in Hot Springs, North Carolina, just last year. But the path to installing these microgrids can also be community organized and proposed. The only way we're all making it out of this microwave alive is through connection, empathy, and respect for each other as well as the planet. The best solutions will come from different corners of the globe as we all try to adapt to a changing planet. Try to listen before you judge, and don't underestimate just how much damage the planet is taking right under your nose. And don't fall prey to apathy. Not just because it isn't helpful to you, but because that's how companies get away with polluting communities of color and rural areas. That garbage compactor in Detroit was only shut down once people realized they were being killed by something they could fix and rallied around the issue. Climate change can be met with a societal one. And I hope that after tonight, you all consider how to make it a more just change as well. Thank you.